following with the session on the private sector point of view on the digital coordination, we have the honor to have Alan Glickenhouse. So he is the digital strategist at IBM, and he's going to explain us how IBM tackles with the integration between the technical and legal interface in their corporation, in his corporation. Sorry. Hello, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine. Yeah, thank you. Really looking forward to listen to learn from you and your experience.
Well, I'm glad to be able to do it. I was telling the folks in preparation that one of the challenges that you have as a speaker sometimes is that the technology fails you. And this morning, my laptop was not connecting to the internet, and that's where this presentation was. So I panicked and fought my way through getting it over to my home computer, and so luckily it made it, and I can actually look at the slides while speaking. So should I get going?
You've got the floor, and we are really looking forward to your speech. Yes.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Alan Glickenhouse. I'm with IBM. I'm the digital transformation and API business strategist, and I specifically pointed out that I am not a lawyer. So my background here is not as one who's an expert in legal, but one who has, from an API perspective and from other technologies over decades of my career, worked with legal many times. And so that's the perspective I'm going to be bringing forward here today. So this is just about me. I do a lot of events for API Days and speak with customers around the world. I also write a lot of articles, and when the API Days folks requested that I be part of today's session, they specifically pointed me to one of the articles that I wrote, which was in the strategy, governance, and best practices area that I write about. And I'll be speaking about basically what I wrote about how to discuss your API initiative with the legal department. I'll also point that to one other one, which we'll get to a little bit later. These numbers that you see on this slide are the number of things that I've published in each one of these areas. And as always with my presentations, the backup slides will have all the links to all of this content. So when you get these, you can go look for this article and many others. So what are technologists afraid of? And I added a new one this morning, which is fear of your laptop not working on the day you have to present. But you probably have seen historically the list of the top fears that people have. And number 4 on the list is fear of death. And number 1 on the list is what I'm doing right now, bravely, is speaking in public. And so there's a long list of things that people are afraid of. And I think the newest thing we need to add to that list is having to talk to legal. So this is just one of those things that technologists dread. They know that when they go there, there's going to be some challenges. The legal folks don't speak the same language that we do. They don't understand the technology and anything about it. And they're going to tell me I can't do something that I want to do. And I really don't want to have to, fight through all that battle, right? So that's kind of what's staring us in the face when we have to go speak to legal. But if you prepare yourself well, you're not going to have as much of a problem. And so I'm going to try to outline some of the thinking that I do when I have to go to legal and prepare to have a discussion with them. And so the first thing to do is understand what is legal's motivation. Why are they going to tell you no, right? I mean, what are they trying to stop from happening? And basically, legal is trying to make sure that the company doesn't get into any trouble, right? That they don't want to have lawsuits against the company, and they don't want to have misuse of business assets or incorrect use of business assets. And so that's what they're afraid of happening. And, as this is an API conference, an API audience, that APIs are about distributing business assets to people, right? And so there's a natural concern that lawyers may have when they say, wait a minute, you're trying to give assets to people. I want to, be sure that this is not going to be a problem for the company. And so your job when you go to speak to legal is to show that you have thought about these issues and you have them all under control. I'm a big fan of learning from mistakes that have gone before. And I dealt with this a long time ago in the 90s with the World Wide Web. And I was out at that point speaking to companies about the web. Yeah, I've been around a long time. And at the beginning, companies would put a website up that was just text and maybe some graphics, but it was so slow at the time, you didn't even have a lot of graphics. And they would just try to point people to come to their store. Hey, come to my store. We're having a sale, or call us on our 800 toll-free number, and you can buy from our customer service reps. Amazingly, some companies saw another opportunity that this could be a channel to market for e-commerce, and we can actually do the transactions on the web as opposed to making people come into the store. And there was a lot of debate about that at the time. Companies were concerned about not getting people to come into the store, that they wouldn't buy other things that they saw in the store and so on. And there were a lot of other concerns, but some of the concerns were about legal issues, right? Are we exposing assets? Are we going to have security in the payments and things like that? Are we going to deal with privacy well? And these were all legal issues that for some companies, it slowed them down so much that they went out of business, because the other companies that went forward with e-commerce were able to get such a dominant space in the market that they fell so far behind that it was really a problem. So the lessons to be learned from this are that we should be thinking about APIs not as a technology, but as a new channel to market, and just as the web was. And this is a new opportunity for our business to do new and innovative things. And the question is not, are we going to do these things with APIs, but what do we need to do to make this new channel work for us? And so, don't go into a legal discussion with, yes, I need your approval, kind of a conversation. The answer is going to be yes. The question is, how do we get to yes, right? So that's the issue. Now, before I get into the bigger list of questions that we want to discuss with legal, it's worth also talking about the fact that you don't always have to go to legal for every API thing that you do. Many of the initial use cases that you do with APIs are just doing things better than you've done before in the same thing that you've done before. So if this is an internal integration kind of a scenario where one application is calling another application through an API, that's not anything that legal needs to get involved with. But as soon as we start to get involved with more channel oriented or things with private information or sensitive information, then we're going to need to have a conversation with legal. And topics which in the EU, of course, have been extremely important, such as GDPR and PSD2, are things which also have a lot to do with APIs. And so, again, we'll be going to legal around those. So, the typical way we talk about scenarios for APIs is for internal consumers, partners, and public APIs. And the internal ones, to a large extent, you're probably not going to be doing a lot with legal on those. You may be providing API capabilities for your mobile app developers or social media or sharing information or whatever inside the company. And the API is just a vehicle to getting the data to that person. The mobile app itself may have to have gone through some kind of a legal approval to make sure that things are being done well. But the API is probably not a specific thing that needs to go through the approval, since it's being used internally. The partner one is probably the major area. When you're starting to deal with getting outside the company with partners, ensuring that the partners have access to only the things that they're supposed to have access to, and that they can only see what they're supposed to see, and that they're using the APIs in an appropriate way. These are the things that legal is going to be most concerned about. And so we'll have probably most of our discussions in this partner space. Now, you might think that public is the area where there'll be a lot of concerns, because making APIs available to anybody who we don't even know could certainly raise a concern that legal might have some upset stomachs about. But it really is often the case that that's not an issue, because most of the public APIs that we make available don't have any sensitive information in them. They're really just the same information that you would find on that static web page about what your business does, where you're located, generic information that anybody could find anywhere. It's not going to be your account balances or, things like that, that we're going to give out in public APIs. So as long as, you may have the conversation with them, but put their mind at ease that the public APIs that you make available are not going to have sensitive data in them. They're going to be just general public information. All right, so here's the big list, right? And I made this list, and I'm sure it's not complete, but this was the kind of things that I was thinking about from my experiences with legal, that they would be asking about, right? So the more you can go into the conversation, having prepared the answers to these questions, the better you will be, and you'll show them that you have these under control, right? So I'm not going to read through all of them, but I mentioned GDPR. GDPR is a particularly important one because of the ability for the consumer to keep control of their own information, and so you have to show that you are, when you're gathering information about that consumer, enabling GDPR compliance still, that they can tell you to delete the information or not share it with anybody, and so on as you go through it. There are a whole bunch of them here about owning the data that you're providing and making sure that the audience is entitled to that particular data. Again, some of these are applicable to some businesses and others applicable to others. How are you communicating to the person who's consuming the API, how the API is intended and legally must be used, and if there's any kind of attribution for using this that they need to put on their use of, whatever the end use is. Like, in the old days, even today, you buy a computer and it has an Intel chip in it. It says Intel inside. That's, Intel's requirement that you notify the consumer, the end consumer, that there's an Intel chip in here. You may have requirements that, whoever is using their solution that uses your API, that they notify them that you're involved in this in whatever the right way is. There may be issues around privacy. So making sure that only the customer can see only their data and not other people's data. Organizational privacy about partners, and so that the partners can only see their customer information, not other partners' customers' information. So these are the kind of things that lawyers will be asking about, especially about if there is something that is done incorrectly, how do you notice that, and how do you rectify it? And so these are the kind of questions, and I'm sure you can think of probably 10 more, but this is the kind of thinking that if you have this up front and you've thought about these and you have answers to all these, when you go into the legal department, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable in moving forward with your initiative. Now, this is a funny story. So I wrote the article about how to bring your API initiative to legal. And a few months later, I was contacted by Moritz Anagarn, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, from a company, Wolters Kluwer, that works with lawyers. And so he read my article and he said, I want to do an opposite article. I want to write something for the lawyers so that the lawyers can understand what APIs are, so that when the API leaders come into the legal department, they can have a conversation understanding what APIs are. So that initial chart that I showed that says, people, lawyers don't understand APIs. Well, they want to get ahead of the game here and realize that APIs are something that they do need to become aware of. So we wrote a joint article. It's published under Moritz's name on LinkedIn. And again, this link will get you to that. And the idea of this article is for lawyers to read it, so that when you come to them, they'll have a basic understanding of APIs, and also that they'll understand who in the company they might want to go to say, hey, are you doing something with APIs? And I'd like to work with you on that, right? So this is the opposite perspective of the other article that most of this presentation was about. All right, so let me just wrap this up. No is not an option. We can't have no. Lawyers cannot say no, right? This is not allowed. So we have to get to yes. Now, this is going to be uncomfortable, right? I mean, you're not working with an API technology here. This is not your normal API discussion about consumers and providers and REST and, you know, all the other things that we deal with, security. This is legal, right? And so you're going to have a less comfortable discussion here with the legal department than you typically do. So just get yourself ready for that. I don't have any other words of wisdom on that. Other than the second one, which is be prepared, right? So the more you can prepare for what their expected concerns might be, the longer way you're going to go to having a successful outcome. You know, the world is using APIs, and at this point, you know, many of these discussions have already happened. APIs are not a new thing anymore, and so if there is still a discussion to have about, you know, API usage, it may be about some more of the finer points and less about are we going to do APIs or not. Of course, there are always companies that are first getting into APIs, and so some of the basic things may be needed there as well. So that's really all I had. I'm going to just show the last couple of charts here. These are all the articles that I've written. As I mentioned, you know, the one toward the bottom here somewhere is discussing your API initiative with the legal department. That's the article that most of this presentation was written for. And then on the last page here, in this industry column, there's a column for legal versus IT, which is the second article. And then, of course, there's all the other articles that you can access through this. So that's it. That's all I had.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Alan. It's been really a pleasure. I'm not sure if there are big questions on the chat, but I certainly have one. So you have talked about, so me, myself, I'm one of those who hide in the past, not trying to have this conversation with the lawyers. And it's true that when you say that it's better to get them aware of what is coming and to have a conversation from the very first stages of the design where you are conceptualizing the idea, and you can involve them in a way that they can let you know what are the important aspects that you can communicate. Will reduce the amount of work that and the amount of no's that you will have in the end. Indeed. Yeah. So I also like the way that you structure the conversation. So trying to analyze a scenario by a scenario. Is the API going to be exposeful to the external world? This is internal, and then the legal implications will be ones or others indeed. So very nice. So my question here is, you're talking about the organizational point of view of, I'm a provider of APIs and I'm giving them to them. So are you aware that these legal departments do any kind of coordination with APIs or other consumers of the APIs in order to establish certain kinds of rights, or depending on different actors? So one API that behaves or has different legal concerns than others at the technical or at the legal level.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I probably should have thought about that and put that into the presentation too. It's, you know, I did it from a provider perspective. And when you consume other people's APIs, there's also legal concerns, right? So if you're basing your solutions on someone else's API and they don't deliver bad information, any number of things that could go wrong, what are your liabilities and you know, to your end customer, right? And so good points to add to the list of questions that you need to think about from a going to legal perspective, because almost every business that I speak to nowadays is not only a provider of APIs, but they consume APIs, and so people are in the mode of doing both. And yeah, I think that's a great point. Maybe another article to come in the future on legal from a consumer perspective. But yeah, that's a very good point, and I think something that should be added to that list. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much indeed. And